Good morning, everybody on the Symphony Choir Facebook page. For those of you that are watching this and know nothing about the Symphony Choir, please go and subscribe to or join us and follow us on Facebook, the Symphony Choir of Cape Town. The talks all appear there, and thanks to a suggestion by a friend and a cellist in Cape Town, Graham Duplessis, I have added them to a YouTube channel for those people that don't have any access to Facebook, or don't want any access to Facebook. I see the first few people joining. Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to have you all here with me at my house and get a chance to begin what I'm looking at is a 3-week kind of conversation where we're going to lead from one thing, hopefully leading into the next week, into the final week. And at the end of that, we will see how it all goes and whether we're all still stuck at home. So good morning to those that have just joined. The whole thing today is to talk about my favorites. So avoiding the sort of obvious title that is evident there. I've Fokins favorites with my full surname. It was sort of a fun, sort of catchy title just to start the conversation, I think. And what I've done is I've gone out and looked at the music that has sort of influenced me. I think when you have a conversation about your favorites, I think you open yourself up to a lot of questions, a lot of insight into who you are. I'll tell you something very interesting. I find it interesting in that when we first discussed this particular program and understanding and talk, I started looking at the pieces I love and through my life and trying to choose my favorites became a rather difficult task. At one stage, it looked like the only pieces I found as favorites all had something to do with death, which was maybe a little bit more telling than I think I wanted to. And I started thinking about what are your favorites? What are your favorite musics? What are your favorite things to listen to? And this became what is now a much bigger. Okay, sorry, the crying face. This became a much bigger question, which leads into the concept of programming, music in life, music in the background, and how we're going to potentially use music in the future. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, those that are saying good morning. Yes, it's great to have you guys here. It's great to join with you in lockdown, and sort of a wonderful opportunity for me to sort of hopefully get your minds thinking in the time that you have, where many of us are doing not much more than actually thinking or hanging around the house. So when I had to look at favorites, I tried to decide what is a favorite. What is something that will make this conversation interesting? And I started realizing that to look at a favorite, you almost have to look at your entire connection to the piece. Obviously, that seems a bit sort of obvious. I hope some of you have had a chance to go listen to the pieces. And the goal today is to send you to that link to listen to. I created a YouTube playlist, and with some of the recordings that I'm very, very fond of as well. Jesse Norman's 4 Last Songs are one of the most sublime moments of singing ever in the last 100 years. To try and help you also discover what is it that you look for when you listen to a piece of music. Why does that piece of music stick out in your life? What is it about that music that makes you want to listen to it over and over again? It's been a sort of a long journey through obviously my life studying music from high school. So I've listened to a fair amount of music. I've been to a number of concerts. I've been in orchestras and choirs. So I've really had an opportunity to listen to a lot of music. And what I've noticed, the one thing, is that some pieces just stick. And why do they stick? Why is it those pieces that in certain moments you always go back to? And I think that's what I looked at. And what my challenge is for all of you that are listening to this or watching this is go and create your list of favorites. And I'd love to see your comments of favorite pieces of music. And if you look at my list, it's very, very varied in many ways, because there is a lot of music in this world. And there are a lot of moments where they can move you, they can touch you, they can entertain you. And I think we're going to start there with purely the entertainment. Modern major, I am the very modern model of a modern major general. Why on earth would that come onto the list? And I'll be very, very simple. When I was growing up, my father was a very, very huge fan of Gilbert and Sullivan. And I don't actually remember the And Lord Weber rehearsal. And he used to listen to, and this was one of his favorite songs. And I think that is very, very important when you're looking at what is your favorite music, what is the music. It's music has an ability to bring back great memories. And I think some of my favorites are all purely about memory, purely about experiencing something when I was younger, experiencing parts of my life. And if I get into that, the list will go on for weeks and days, and it'll sort of never end. What I love about the modern major general is the incredible control required for the singer, the words and the comic effect. And I think that's what got my father, was the play of the words as he's going through that song, and the absolute ludicrous rhymes that he comes up with. Gilbert and Sullivan were renowned for taking on the political establishment of their day. And this is one of those songs where they poke an enormous amount of fun at the government, at the people in charge. The pinafore, I mean, making a joke about the head of the Navy who'd never actually been on a boat. And in this particular one, the sort of crazy rhymes that come out in the middle of the song, and how he has to stop and he bumbles his way through. It really, really entertained him, and then subsequently, I suppose, entertained me. So it has this attachment to a person in my life, and that is probably why it has stuck. I was playing it last night, and my wife, for those of you who don't know my wife, and for the choir members, you all know Margaret, she was listening and asked me to please turn that infernal sound off. Because for her, it just is that first listening, and that's the next thing. I don't believe you can choose something as a favorite on one listening. I think it's something that there's something about the piece that sticks, be it a memory, be it an emotion, but it sticks there, and then you go back to it, and ultimately it sort of works its way into your life as a piece that you always turn to when you are interested or have a certain feeling about life or whatever. Go and listen to the very model of a modern major general. The other thing about it is the incredible ability for the artist to make it their own. That is the most exciting thing about a piece like this. The artist has an opportunity to be different every single time. There's so many variants, there's so many changes that can happen. And from that case, it becomes a moment in art where you can create something different. What you'll notice for this list, there are a lot of songs on it. There's a lot of words. I'm fascinated by words. I'm fascinated by the meaning of words. I've left out a lot of music. I can promise you things like the Mozart Requiem, the Brahms Requiem, the Missa Solemnis. These sit out in my life as quintessential and massive works that I have loved and enjoyed and have moved me continuously through my life, depending on where I am in my space. But I'm talking about these specific moments and movements that have affected me. Let's go to the Brahms, the Symphony number 3 in F major, Opus 90. In this case, I put the first movement, but I will say this is probably my favorite symphonic work. Margie, we can do hundreds of these. It's probably my favorite symphonic work ever in the history of sort of music. I don't know why. I have heard it numerous times. In fact, it was quite funny. It became a favorite of mine when I was quite young, as a teenager. There's something powerful about the opening chords, its structure, the way it's put together, the most exquisite slower movement. That has always stuck by me as just this incredible creation. Something magnificent was created within a very controlled and structured environment. And for me, that is its greatest selling point. the funniest thing was rewatching Faulty Towers, and somewhere along the line, Basil Fawlty puts on a recording, and it happens to be Brahms' Third Symphony, and his wife walks in and says, "Turn off that racket," and he says, "That's Brahms' third racket," which is always a favorite TV show of mine as well. Falcon's favorite concert would go on for hours and hours on end. There's something powerful in the music of Brahms for me. It is, of the Romantics, by far my favorite, up against Bruckner, Mahler. Something powerful and often understated. I've had the privilege of doing 2 of the symphonies, but this one I have avoided programming for myself. It's a piece that I think stands out as too big, too important to me to tackle. And I know one day I think I'll be old enough to go ahead and try it out and sort of do my absolute best to do something to a work that I think is this truly brilliantly created. And in this case, I put the first movement. I didn't want to put all 30-something minutes of the piece up for you. Please go and listen to it. And that is the goal here, to stretch what you listen to, go out there and listen to different types of music. And that's going to bring me to the one which may stand out for some people, the Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain. This piece it was a sort of defining moment for me in deciding what is music and what is the importance of music. I was in grad school. I had the privilege of having a history lecturer that was very revered in the American music scene. He wrote books about Louis Armstrong and was very pro looking at all different types of backgrounds and musics and stuff like that. And he put out Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain. And he made this statement. If you look at the words, I'm just going to read the first line. In twilight glow, I see her blue eyes crying in the rain. When we kissed goodbye and parted, I knew we'd never meet again. The show is quite short. The song, is quite short. But now let's listen to, I'm going to read you some words for another of my favorites, and this is the Brooks Lullaby, the end of the Schöne Müllerin by Schubert. Rest well, close your eyes. Wanderer, you weary one, you are at home. Fidelity is here, you'll lie with me until the sea drains the brook dry. His statement was, Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain is as powerful lyrically, as organized musically, and as concise as any art song. And that is why he put it out there. And this particular statement has stuck with me, because the question is always, is this person any good? Do I like this music? Do you not like this music? I have this constant debate with my students about violinists. I'm not going to mention any names of people, but what exactly is the purpose? An art song is a song that was not meant to be acted or performed. It's for a soloist, and generally a pianist and vocalist, just 2 people. It's a form of vocal chamber music, and they generally tell some kind of story, more often than not about death and love and lost love. In the case of the Schöne Müllerin, it is a song cycle. It's a series of 20 songs, individual songs that sort of go through a story from the beginning to the very end. And I'll get to that in a moment when I discuss the Schöne Müllerin. So when you look at something like Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, maybe not sort of what one would associate with Schubert or Schumann or even Beethoven or any of that. But when you look a little deeper, you find something maybe even more powerful, something more that connects with a more colloquial, shall I say, a sound, or certainly a sound that may move some people and not others. Isn't that what music's about? If Winterreise is also fantastic. I particularly love this one song for its meaning, and I'll get to that next because we're going to talk about these 2 back to back. The last verse of Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain is, someday when we meet up yonder, we'll stroll hand in hand again, in land that knows no parting, and the blue eyes crying in the rain. The last verse of the Brooks Lullaby good night, until everything wakes. Sleep away your joy, sleep away your pain. The full moon rises, the mist departs, and the sky above, how vast it is. Not necessarily the greatest translation, but we're going to keep it English for this particular discussion. I think rest my case. And I must say, grad school for me was a wonderful time of study and adventure. I had the most amazing lecturers. So not just a question of what is music. What are my favorites? What are your favorites? And I think that's one of the things I want you all to do. Please send me your favorites. You can do it right here. I'm seeing a few people putting up recommendations. Please do it here. Send it to me in a private message if you too what. But never ever be embarrassed to say I love this particular music, because for some reason it speaks to you. Does that make it wrong? Does that make it not music? Does that make it not worthwhile? Yeah, there's a lot of music I have absolutely no interest in listening to. Many of those pieces played by our teenage children, but that's sort of a generational thing. I think my father felt exactly the same way. But still, for some reason, it speaks to them. It even just is entertainment. And I must say, I've also always looked at music. Sometimes it must just be entertainment. And I am the very model of a modern major general. Thank you, Glenn. Absolutely beautiful words. Beautiful words. And I must admit, it sent me on a journey to go and listen to more and more country music. Some which stuck, some which disappeared. That's more than I'm going to say. That's about that anyway. So we put this now against the choice of the final song of the Schöne Müllerin. Why choose that one? The story of the Müllerin, a miller basically goes, he works in a mill. It starts with happiness. He falls in love with the miller's daughter, and she sort of, in his mind, betrays him. And in the final song, this Brooks lullaby that I read earlier to you, rest well, close your eyes. He is standing at the brook, contemplating drowning himself. And where Schubert has written almost entirely from the point of view of the young man, he now makes this final song from the point of view of the brook. And the brook sings to him and calls him into join in and join him, go away. In his mind, the brook says, go away, depart from the mill bridge, you wicked girl, so your shadow won't wake him. Right? Throw into me your fine scarf so I can cover his eyes. Those are very, very powerful words. And to make this statement has always moved me. And this image of this brook, this water flowing gently past a man at the end of his life, or choosing to end the life that he's living. And it sings to him and tries to comfort him, as well as there's a sort of very darkness, a great darkness to the work as well, where this, he's actually sitting at this abyss in his life, and the brook seems to call him to continue. As I said, a lot of the ones in this conversation ended up being about death. I don't know why, actually. I mean, maybe somebody to go look at. One of our early memories in life, maybe not that early, but certainly it was a massive impact. And I'll tell you a story about it in a moment. Was when I was about 12, and I had the opportunity to sing in the children's chorus in Turandot. And if I remember correctly, the Turandot at the time was Marita Napier. And it was one of the very first times she returned to South Africa. And I remember being on stage in Act 2, and you sit there for the entire 40 minutes of the act, and the queen, the princess, Turandot herself, has to now pose these questions. The story is magnificent. I mean, to me, it's it's a piece. It's what I call one of my death wish or bucket list pieces that I would love to do one day. So for me, it may have problems. Obviously, Puccini died in the middle of writing it, or right at the end, and it may structurally be a little bit all over the place at times, but it's an incredibly powerful piece that I have seen a number of productions and I've enjoyed immensely. And maybe that's again because it had this massive influence when I was younger. Having this opportunity to stand on stage, or sit on stage in this case, at the foot of the emperor, and Marita Napier comes on stage and begins the 3 questions. A prince has fallen in love with the princess, with Turandot, as he saw her once and her story, but she has a rule. You must answer 3 questions to gain her love, and if you fail, you are executed, and if you win, you will gain her hand in marriage. And, you know, true operatic style. It's a series of questions, and then she'll love you forever. And the Inquesta Regia is the princess posing those 3 questions to Caliph, the prince. Sitting on the stage, watching an artist like Marita Napier deliver this sort of aria, almost like a monologue, great monologue, where she poses these questions, and the final one, what is cold as ice but burns like fire, and the answer being Turandot herself, it was something that has stuck with me forever. Even the 45 minutes just putting on a skull cap. It's very difficult to sit still when you're that young, and that was not even enough. And I'll tell you even more about that. Obviously, most people's favorite is Nessun Dorma, beginning of the next act. And when I finally got a chance to meet Sidwell Hartman, the late Sidwell Hartman, the wonderful tenor that came from South Africa, he was singing. It was quite a cast, I must say, when I was there. He was singing Caliph, and Virginia Davids was singing You. A few of us who loved music and loved opera in particular and had really grown to love this, every night we were done at the end of Act 2 and at the beginning of Act 3 they would sing Nessun Dorma, and we would stand backstage and wait for Sidwell to sing Nessun Dorma before our parents picked us up. And truly a defining moment. I think that is a lot of what favorites are about. Defining moments in your life, moments that have moved you, helping you through times of trouble, helping you through moments of great joy as well. I must never ever forget that. Sometimes it's just a lot of fun. These are beautiful pieces everybody's putting up. I mean, Nimrod for me, I have played it throughout my life, and it also has a very powerful part. It's a piece that is chosen, so I know certainly in South Africa, every time somebody that is a member of the orchestra community passes on, and they play that in their memory beforehand. And we have done it a few times for some wonderful musicians, and I did it once also in commemoration of other people in my life, and it has always been very powerful. But I decided to choose another work to discuss from the Enigma Variations, and that is Variation 11, GRS. Oh no! Please don't. There's no such thing as having tomatoes thrown. We're putting ourselves very much in a place where we can love everything that means something to us. I have conducted South Pacific and absolutely love the musical. I think it's wonderful fun. I think it's incredibly forward-thinking. If you think about when it was written, it addresses a number of issues from that time, and some issues are still relevant today. When you look at something like South Pacific, one must never ever forget, though, the time in which it was written. So if we look at it now, and 60-something years later, and we wonder, if we look at some of the aspects that go into it, we sort of, maybe it's a bit cringy at times, but that is from 70 years later. At the time, it put some incredibly powerful questions and statements on the stage for the average sort of musical theatre follower. Going back to the Elgar, why do I love this one so much? GRS. A famous friend of, if you know anything about the Enigma Variations, they're all a series of portraits, little musical portraits of his friends, the friends of Elgar. And this particular one is about a friend who was an organist, but it's got absolutely nothing to do with his organ playing or even organ or anything about music whatsoever. We're just going to find up here quickly. Yes, George Robertson Sinclair. He was the organist at Hereford Cathedral. It has nothing to do with his friend's organ playing, his abilities. It's all about the bulldog. The story goes that Elgar... Oh, okay. Elgar was walking out with outside with his friend, George Sinclair, and his bulldog fell down this embankment, rolled to the bottom, swam back upriver, climbed up and started barking at them loudly. Now, that is purely entertainment, purely excitement. And the story goes that Sinclair said, "Set that to music." And Elgar's response was, "I did, and here it is." Pure humor, finding the essence of a friend entirely unrelated to what everybody knew him for, a personal tribute in a personal moment. And if you listen to the piece, it really gives this wonderful, wonderful feeling of this dog falling down the hill, and the excitement of, if you've ever had an animal or a child or a person, fall over, there's always a moment of panic and a sort of chaotic moment, and then there's the sort of joy that they're okay. I don't know if it's possible to say much more. I mean, the whole work, the Enigma Variations, is quintessential work, certainly in English music. Every single movement is beautifully crafted. Nimrod moves most people from that listen to it, but this particular variation is so different to so many of the others that it's why it has stuck out with me. There's that question between people ask about Elgar himself. I think that's one of the enigmas. The enigma is, what is the melody? And that's why he never really answered that question. There are one or two that are very, very difficult to guess. Exactly. And the moments in La Boheme as well. Just fun, purely entertainment. And around that moment of entertainment, they create something more powerful and more exciting and more dramatic, perhaps. They build it up and up and up. The other ones, and then what I would like to do is when we get on, I'm going to sort of begin to discuss how I'm going to move from here. And that's why I want you all to start telling me, pieces that you've loved. And I've seen some amazing suggestions, some very, very beautiful works and other works. Send me your favorites. I think it's important. And please never, ever feel, certainly in my opinion, that the music that makes you happy or moves you or helps you think or whatever is any less than somebody else's choices. And that's one of the big reasons I'm doing this. That is something that I have believed in my entire life. Sometimes there are works like the Missa Solemnis that we all know so well that are just so magnificent. Why is that not one of my favorites? I think for this particular talk, it just didn't fit the way I would want it to move forward through this. It didn't fit the sort of one little thing. The work for me has to be a whole, the complete. And I said earlier, for those of you that joined in, the Requiems of Brahms and Verdi and Mozart, the C minor Mass, these are also quintessential works in my life. But why not here? Because it's the whole work. I think those works need to stand as a complete work to really, really succeed in what they set out to do. In this particular talk, it's simply a question of pieces that, if I had to listen to one piece here, one piece there, I would most definitely choose these pieces to get through. If I look at, again, the pieces I feel I must conduct in my life, and I got the opportunity last year to do one of those works. One of the most powerful, and unfortunately, yes, it is about death, but it's not about the sadness. There's an absolutely glorious beauty to this piece by Richard Strauss, his 4 last songs. And in particular, the... Sorry, I get sidetracked, but Beverly, if the list keeps growing, the funeral's going to go on forever. Do you have separate ones, whatever? Okay, funnily enough, that talk about funerals, there is a piece on here that has moved me so deeply that I do actually want it played somewhere after I pass away. But let's talk about how life has affected these composers. I mean, we've done a lot of that already. Sometimes it's just great music. Sometimes it really is a moment in your life that affects you. But the one I think that stands out for me is the song I said, the four last songs of Strauss. He wrote these songs right at the end of his life, where he talks very much about passing, but never in a sort of sad, sort of depressing, heavy-handed way. They are exquisitely crafted pieces of music. Richard Strauss wrote the book, and that's not a euphemism, that's the truth, about orchestration. And what he manages to do in these last songs is create an absolutely glorious palette of different colors, where the voice is just part of that. This was written, I think, just after the Second World War, so a time of, great upheaval, obviously, and great sadness, great change, and it was way right at the end of his life. And in particular, the last one. There is this image in the last one that I want to bring to your attention. The last one is at sunset. And the last two verses are, I think let's go through all the words. Yes, Berlioz did, as did Ravel and Rimsky-Korsakov. This at sunset, that's the one of the four that is from a different poet, and the words very much we have: through sorrow and joy gone hand in hand, from our wanderings let's now rest in this quiet land. Around us the valleys bow as the sun goes down, two larks soar upwards dreamily into the light air. Come close and let them fly, soon it will be time for sleep, let's not lose our way in this solitude. O vast, tranquil peace, so deep in the evening's glow, how weary we are of wandering, is this perhaps a hint of death? It sounds quite sort of dramatic at the end, but if you listen to it, and I hope you do, and this performance by Jesse Norman that I put up is just something that should make you stand still for quite some time after it's finished, there's no sort of massive chords, there's no overwhelming sense of gloom and doom. There's just this wonderful lifting up of the music and almost the soul, as he sort of suggests these two birds that are flying upwards and moving off onto a different, well, you can decide wherever it's going and what happens after that. That's another thing. And it's one thing I keep hitting on. It's personal. It's what moves you. And I see Jan put up Songs of Travel by Vaughan Williams, Memories of Singing Student Days. That is so, so very important. The memories, the images. Why is it important to you? I also put up a little extra, and it's not necessarily that the song I put up from Man of La Mancha, so all of a sudden his name escapes me, The Impossible Dream, so much as a favorite of mine, but that particular performance is what I consider to be an absolute masterclass in communication, in becoming the part, becoming the role, becoming Don Quixote. If you watch that carefully, and you'll see how this amazing musical theatre singer, Brian Stokes Mitchell, changes from a man telling a story into actually becoming this knight that wants to take on the world and follow his sort of dream of knighthood and valor. It's something that I show my students, many of my conducting students, for them to see what performance requires. If you can throw that sort of intensity into a performance, you have a far greater chance of moving people, making a piece of music stick. And you will forget. The funny thing is that if you can create that sort of focus, that sort of mood, that sort of intensity in your performance, sometimes you will be forgiven accidents, mistakes, slips of music. And that's something I want certainly my choir members that have watched this to really, really think about. Yes, we make mistakes. Some of the greatest musicians in history made mistakes in performances, in recordings. I got to watch an amazing pianist at the end of his... We talked about a Tierce to Picardy a few weeks ago. in the Nelson Mass conversation. And at the end of this performance of a Bach work, he hit a major and a minor third at the same time, and didn't run away, didn't pull up his hands, didn't get upset or anything. He just held it. It's what happened. And that was, in my opinion, a great moment of musical courage and musical integrity. It happens. Embrace it. Sometimes, choir members, this happens. Sometimes it doesn't quite go the way you want it to, but it doesn't mean that the entire performance has been a disaster. Go and check out the video of The Impossible Dream that I put up, and watch the artist as he transforms himself through the particular work. What's even more impressive is that's at the Tony Awards ceremony, and so it's actually awards for musical theatre performers. This brings me to the very sort of last piece. I have no idea why this has moved me so much, but it has moved me from day one. It's from the Liebeslieder Waltzes by Brahms, the Nichtwandel. It's tenors only, which again, I'm not entirely sure why that moved me to this level. I'll tell you that the Liebeslieder Waltzes was brought to me by a great man, the person that loved music and certainly was a lover of choirs. And I fell in love with the whole work, that and the newer version. And this particular one just has this message out there where he says, "Do not wander, my love, out there in the fields. The ground would be too wet for your tender feet." I'm not going to read the rest. It's just a little bit too sad. But this is a work that I've come back to time and time again in moments of feeling down, contemplative, emotional. It somehow manages to settle and gives me this image of eternity. I have no idea why. This is something that maybe in this time we just cannot explain. And I think that's a very important thing when you're choosing music that you love. Sometimes you just can't explain it. And sometimes you shouldn't have to explain it. It's just something you enjoy, something that gets you excited, something that helps you think, contemplate, remember, feel joy, feel happiness. It's that powerful. And this then becomes this journey and the story that I want to go through from here on out. This power is so important when you go ahead and put programs together. When you start deciding, yes, Richard Lewis does, when you start deciding how you're going to put out a concert, how are you going to start a birthday party, how are you going to set up a museum, set up a restaurant. The choice of music has to be one of the priorities, because it can change the entire feeling or approach or experience that a person has to your concert, to your life. I think Margaret here has asked contemporary classical favorites. Again, there are so many. The Road Less Not Taken, all the Robert Frost that we've done have always been a favorite of mine. Last year's performance, I listened to it again the other night. Barry put it up on Facebook, of Choose Something Like a Star. And it's, again, the combination of great music and absolutely beautiful words put together to create this moment that was sublime. Road Not Taken. And then in the series of songs, you also have things like A Girl's Garden, which is just downright silly. Stopping by the Snowy Woods. All of those different songs are really, really powerful. Great words, great music, and crafted in a way that it will make you smile, make you cry, make you dream. How can that not be a favorite of somebody? Obviously, the Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring, I think that's most people's favorites. Again, a story, powerful story that is just rhythmical and drives through to the end. I fell asleep once listening to The Rite of Spring on my headphones back, many years ago. The dreams are pretty terrifying. Do I think composers factor this in these days? I really do think they do. I've done some works by my brother, who is a collector of sounds, certainly from African musics and the music of Southern African musicians, choral music. I think that a lot of them go out there and more these days are looking for that emotional connection with their audiences. I think there was a time period where many composers were more interested in the mathematics or the create works that are complex and sort of intricate, and through that intricate composition techniques created very powerful works, but have, for me, and many people have left sort of, I'm going to use the word cold, but I think that's a bit harsh, but have not sort of managed to have people hook onto them. Overtone singing, well, it all depends on how it's used. Glenn, I said, I've put up on the playlist that's on the Facebook site, the Jesse Norman 4 Lost Songs. And I've put up just the last one. You can go and it's all on YouTube. I listened the other day to the Gorecki Symphony No. 3. It's got some of the most beautiful words in it as well, in each movement. They're from the walls of concentration camps, sung by a soprano. A wonderful use of orchestration, sound. There's another one of my favorite works is the Penderecki, who passed away, the Threnody on a theme for the victims of Hiroshima. Incredibly powerful piece of music. Really intricate, complicated, and yet it makes a statement through the size and the sort of obviously the subject material that really can take your breath away. So I also, as another one, I suggest maybe you try and go listen to. When it comes to modern music, sometimes we run away because we don't understand it. I do think we don't have nearly enough exposure, and we're not quite sure what we're listening to. So don't take away and run away from a piece if you don't necessarily understand it. In the end, you may not like it at all, but sometimes through listening again, doing a bit of research, especially with more and more modern music, it's worth doing the research, trying to figure out something to hold on to. Leonard Slatkin in the United States would program a lot of new music, but I watched him once in a performance and he would explain how the piece is put together. He would explain the sounds that you're listening to. He would explain why the composer did this technique or that technique. And it really does help one hook onto something while you're listening to it and go ahead and enjoy it. There is so much music out there that it is impossible to choose favorites, but it is possible to find combinations that can change your audience's listening experience, hopefully sometimes change their lives. And I think one of the difficult things in the modern world, and we're going to talk about that, is that many people come purely for entertainment. Is that entirely the question of an artist? Is for entertainment? Absolutely, some days, but not always. Sometimes you have to help your audiences travel through a series of emotional experiences, sometimes make them angry, sometimes make them sad. And I think that is what I used to create this particular list, was each emotional experience that I've had with these pieces have stood out with me almost more than the music itself. The Benjamin Britten later operas need listening. One has to listen to them a few times to get used to it. And again, don't try and sit down and listen to it from beginning to end. Go do some research, look at the great arias, which will be on a sort of greatest hits CD, and go listen to the aria first. Then go and maybe listen to 2 or 3 arias from that particular, or rests or whatever from that particular opera, and then try and slowly but surely build yourself into an act. It's training, it's exposure. And this is the one thing certainly in South Africa, and I will get into in 2 weeks' time, we do not have enough exposure to the modern works. So we don't actually know what we need to hold on to listen to. We don't understand how to listen to it, and so we eventually just sort of, your ear will just go, I don't want to anymore. It's a process. All of these other great works you've mentioned, we've listened to from birth, many of us, from young. The Pirates of Pirates of Penzance, the GNS, I've listened to from when I was young, and it stuck. Other people can't stand it. This is an interesting one. I think you need to find your own musical program for something like this. I think this is a time where you go up and down emotionally, and some days you need to just sing along to things like well, I'm not going to make any suggestions there. I know I terrorized some of the choir once with a series of songs that I play when I'm bored. But you need to find your own emotional connections. And oddly enough, oftentimes it has words. The Chichester Psalms are very, very beautiful. Bernstein, one of his great works. I can only say, ladies and gentlemen, go out and listen. Keep an open mind for as long as you can. And if it just doesn't speak to you, just say no and move on. But don't write that composer off. Sometimes they have other works that might have a different connection with you. All right. Next week, we're going to start about programming. How do we put all this together? Just some ideas that I have, that I think about, taking from what we've discussed today. And then ultimately, can we use this to change the way sort of classical music, if I can use that cliche, is approached in the world and presented to the world, maybe just in South Africa, quite different all over the world as to how we go forward. They all have their moments, and that's something you must try and remember. Well, sometimes not. And sometimes pieces may be completely and utterly disregarded by aficionados, but have an enormous impact on an audience. One of the pieces that I've done twice with school kids is the Armed Man by Jenkins. I'm not going to say anything about what I think about the piece necessarily, but I can promise you that that audience and those young people, when they sing, it moved people. They sing the final, the God is great. It moves people to tears in its beauty of that particular moment and how you built up into it. Is it a piece that will stand out like the Missa Solemnis? Only time will tell. But at that moment, it made a difference in the world. I agree, Margaret. The beautiful birds singing, the sound, if you want to get all esoteric, of the grass growing, the clearer waters, the clearer skies is very much the theme of what we're watching here. I hope you all have a wonderful day. And for my choir members that are on here, thank you very much for joining me. And obviously, Margaret's in the background. And we will see you on Wednesday as we try and hold on to the Nelson Mass, because music is what will help us get through all of this and make us stronger in the end. Have a lovely day, everybody. Thank you so much. Bev, before I go, Bev, I'm in a process of trying to get somebody that knows much more about that to do a brief talk about that. There is a lot to say about South African music and South African choral composers. It's my pleasure. Thank you very much, everybody.